The first session is with Dr. DeBoer, Dr. Pena-Castillo, and it is exploring self-grading and self-directed learning in different science courses. I am during flight. I am with CITL. I am going to just take care of some housekeeping items. I'd like to remind everyone that it's going to be recorded and participants online. Please mute your microphones unless you need to talk and ask questions throughout. If you are viewing our session through WebEx, please note that closed captioning CC on the bottom left-hand corner if you require that. And as per our presenter's request, it can be questions throughout if you like. And I'm going to give everyone the heads up at about 25 minutes so we can get ready for the next session. I'm going to pass it right over to you guys, and thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Just before we start, we are going to have some questions, interactive questions during our talk. So these are instructions to connect. You can connect going to this website and using this number, or just scan the QR code. And I will give you just a few seconds to connect. So we are going to be presenting about self-grading and self-direct learning in different science courses. And to start with this, we just want to kind of know how much the audience know about this. So how much do you know about self-grading and self-directed learning? So most of you know something about these pedagogical strategies. So we are going to go quickly through the definitions.
Yes, we'll start with ungrading, which is not on our title page, but is an umbrella term. It's a type of practice that has been becoming more popular, seemingly, and it encompasses a range of different modes of assessment. And the objective can be, or usually falls somewhere in between, reducing the focus on grades. In some courses that use ungrading, there's no grade at all or no numerical grade assigned. That wasn't the case for our courses, but also to increase the focus on learning. So there's a quote that we included here that includes some concepts that are often encompassed in ungrading, like giving better feedback, enabling students to take charge of their own learning.
So self-grading is within that umbrella of ungrading. So it's an alternative assessment strategy where the students are going to give their own grades. Okay, so basically the students will have the responsibility to monitor and evaluate the quality of their own work, and they have to provide evidence about a justification about that grade that they are giving to themselves. And they are going to be provided with some explicit criteria about how to do the self-grading. And they also have to have some reflection on it. So they have to reflect and say, like, okay, how could I have improved in this learning task, or how could I improve my skills?
Okay, and then self-directed learning could also be contained within that larger umbrella of ungrading. And really this revolves around giving learners the agency. And that can be in various ways. So first of all, diagnosing their own learning needs. What is it that they need to learn? What are they, considering the background that they're coming from? Formulating specific learning goals, identifying what they need to learn, choosing strategies to accomplish that learning, and evaluating their outcomes. So you can see that this includes a whole lot of concepts. That kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of where we started from when we approached this in our own courses.
And if you were a student, would you rather design your own assignment projects, or would you prefer to be told what to do? So we have a split between design by law, follow instructions, and don't know. That's interesting.
Yes, very. Okay, so we both sort of consciously and purposefully adopted self-grading and self-directed learning in courses that we taught over the past year. And the reasons or our motivations for doing this were several. So we wanted to recognize the diversity of students. So students coming in from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different comfort levels with the material, really. And then kind of see how this might kind of meet everyone where they are and make them perhaps feel more comfortable. Remove testing pressure. So one of the kind of components we didn't want to really have them focus on is, do we need to know this? Is this going to be on the test? Is this important? We wanted to kind of really remove that and really focus on the learning. And focus on the learning as well as their self-interest, recognizing that within this discipline, this course, this material that we're focusing on, they probably have their own self-interest. We believe that they do. So here's a chance to explore that. They're here for that reason. And foster autonomy as well as collaboration. Collaboration is something we, I think, both observe, a lot of people observe, it's not always something students enjoy. So maybe this is a different way of approaching collaboration that might be better appreciated.
So what was the teaching context? So I was computer science 6936. This is a graduate course. It's called Advanced Machine Learning. It's a 3 hours full-term lecture course. It was in the fall, this fall. And I have 31 students enrolled, one TA. And I have to say, I didn't go full immerse in the self-grading. I have a hybrid approach. Okay, I kind of needed my safety blanket there. So we have the underlying components are basically on grading. So I have a component that was a labor-based learning log. So the students have to complete learning logs every week. And if they complete it, they get that part of the grade. So there is no rubric, no evaluation at all. And then there were one assignment and one project. And those were self-directed, self-graded. So basically, I told the students that they could do whatever they want. So I said, like, design your own assignment, design your own project, and tell me what you are going to do. So that was the first part of it. So tell me what you are going to do. And we gave feedback on that, and then they went and do what they wanted to do. And then they gave themselves a grade with justification. And I have that disclaimer that like, I reserve the right to change their grade based on my own observations. Again, safety blanket. Then I have some graded parts. So I have the graded quizzes and a graded final exam.
Great. So I taught a very different type of course. So my course was a 2-week field course that I taught last spring. So end of May, early June. And this is a field course that was taught at the Bombay Aquarium and Marine Station. The course is called benthic biology. So it covers basically the seafloor, coastal environments, so biology, ecology of these systems. I had a small number of students, 11, nice and cozy, and a diverse set of students. Some were marine biology majors. I had a psychology major. I had students from Grenfell, I had students from here, one teaching assistant, and I dove right in to the water with my course. I wanted to do this entirely self-graded, and I had to let go of my safety blanket, but it, I think, worked out pretty well. So this is a course that I had taught previously. This is my 4th time teaching a field course at the station. I modified my grade breakdown for the course this way. So I removed essentially a final exam. So 2 weeks of intense being in the field, outside, inside. I felt like it was always sort of a weird pressure to do a final exam and do quizzes. So I removed that from the equation, but I still had some components I had used previously, like they need to have a field notebook. There's actually 15% for participation. It's very important for them to learn how to function in this kind of field setting. an orientation exercise, and I'll speak a bit about that. And then most of the grade was based on a project that was self-directed. So they had to give me a plan, there was a midpoint reflection and a final reflection. And recall too, this is a very short 2 weeks, very intense, but I have their full attention the whole time. They're not, we're all living together in this residence. There's nowhere else really for them to go. It's a very exciting and very different type of learning environment. Okay. Oh, so just to maybe give a little bit more of the pedagogy behind this, there are frameworks that have been put together to kind of break down self-grading. So without going into very much detail, this is just an example that was provided where, you know, there's different levels of implementation of self-grading that can be used in courses. Then here they've broken it down from beginning, intermediate, and full stage of implementation. And we've just highlighted here to illustrate that you can kind of do whatever you want as an instructor when you're using these approaches. So we sort of have a mix, and really when we were talking about this, we found that what we did wasn't exactly into these categories from this publication. But it's just to illustrate that there's a lot of flexibility. So you can kind of adjust and maybe 1 year do it one way, another year alter and do things differently.
So what would you ask students to do? In my case, I asked them to plan the assignment and project. So basically the only restriction I gave them is that they have to be related with advanced machine learning, okay, so with the course. So they have to plan an assignment and a project, and I also gave them kind of, for the assignment plan, something that it will take you this amount of time, this amount of hours, and for the project, it's a larger project, so calculate that you have to invest like 25 hours in the project. So just so that they will know what type of activity they could say. So they have to choose the topic for the assignment, the project. They have to tell me what they want to learn from that assignment and project. And then they have to design their assignment and project. And the way I say it, like, give me what you are going to do, like write the assignment or the project as you will be giving it to another student to do it. So give me that amount of detail. So I want to know exactly what you are going to be doing. And we review that. So we review all the plans for both of them with enough amount of time for them to actually take into account our feedback. And then they were giving this feedback and they were asked to kind of consider this feedback for the final assignment and project submission. And then once that they submit the assignment and the project, and this is also, they were free to submit whatever they want. So I told them, you can submit like a poster, you can do an infographic, you can have a video, you can have a GitHub repository, you could have a PDF report of what you have done. So also they were free to report the project and assignment in the best way that they thought that it was fitting for what they wanted to do. And after that, they have to fill a reflection, like a log, and saying like, did you meet your learning loss? Yes, no, what will you change from your assignment or your project? And give a self-grade and with justification. So it was not like, oh, it's about 100. Why is it about 100, right? So that was a really important piece for me. Like they justify why they reserve that grade. And as I said before, I have the disclaimer that it's not reserved the right to modify the self-grade.
Okay, so in my case, I began very first day, we all met in a room and I gave them all an index card. I said, okay, you need to tell me what your personal goals are. What is it that you want out of these 2 weeks? And so they took some time to do that. Then I gave them a couple days to decide what their project would be. So think about it. I gave them options. So I said, okay, you can do really whatever you want that relates to the seafloor, this coastal environment. Or I can give you the option to do what is called the microcosm project. So it's something we developed that would build upon all the different sites that we were going to visit over the 2 weeks. And so they build a hypothesis around that and they'd compare with other groups. So they had that option. I asked for a 1-page reflection after the first week of that experience. how they felt towards their goals, their challenges, if they've had any challenges, what they learned, et cetera. And then at the very end, they had to provide me with a project. It could be individual, it could be in groups, could be in the format of their choice. And then accompanying that was their final reflection and self-graded from all the criteria that I showed you previously. So how much did they get for their field notebook, participation, et cetera. And I gave them back their index cards at the very end. I collected them, gave them back and said, okay, see what you've accomplished and reflect on that as well. So it was about a page or 2-page reflection. And then I also had told them that I had the right to revisit their grade if I felt it was very off. All right, so now moving on to what we observed after our experiences. So I know this is very small text here, but I'll just kind of read for you a couple of snippets that I got back from these reflections. And there's kind of 3 main themes for what I observed. One, and I was really happy to see, increased motivation to learn. I felt like they were really excited that I've removed, or the context removed pressure to focus on, is this important? Is this, do I need to know this? Am I gonna, they removed that out of the equation. And so the student wrote, the lack of pressure for perfection has made me more immersed in the topics and activities we've done out of interest and wonder. I believe for me, this translated into learning and retaining more overall. And then another student said, this course rekindled my passion for learning. So that was really powerful to me. I was really pleased to see that. Increased confidence as well into the skills that they were getting. So a student said, I think the layout, the format of this course allowed me to feel better prepared about my future career, as I felt like it felt like a bridge between undergraduate courses and research. And then I think the thing that surprised me the most was how this fostered really enthusiastic collaboration. And what brings me to say that is I kept finding the students meeting in groups on their own without me prompting them. And the best example of that was on the Saturday night at 8 p.m. So of the several times I've taught this course, I've never seen students get together. They were in a lecture hall. They were all seated and they had the whiteboard and they were like drawing all these things. And I collected this data and what does this mean? And what did you find? And they brought me in to kind of come in and participate in the discussion. They wanted me to hear what they'd come up with and they wanted my thoughts on it. So I'd never seen them, you know, I usually have to like, okay, we should get together and talk about this. But yeah, this was pretty amazing. So I found one student highlighted, I love the feeling of belonging and achievement when working together on a project with my peers. So I was quite pleased to have that outcome.
In 6936, I observed a lot of independence. So they were working more by themselves. For the assignment, they have to work individually, but for the project, they were allowed to work in groups. It was their decision whether they wanted to work alone or with a group. And enthusiasm. So I have a student like, oh, we're working on this, you have to see, and come to my office hours to talk about the project, right? So it was because they were interested in what they were doing that they have more enthusiasm about doing. It was not me giving them a random topic that they were like, what is this? They were really like, choosing this. So this is my topic. Creativity. They came up with assignments and projects that I would not have never thought about. So that was really cool, like to see, oh, that's really a good assignment. And they seem to be more motivated to learn. And in my CQ, I have these 2 questions. So the first assignment is engaging in learning. And they were strongly agreed, 14 of the ones that, 73% of the ones that answered the CQ, that they say yes, it engaged in learning. And this is in an assignment that was not my design, right? Like they have to come up with their assignment and projects. And then when they're in the course, they feel motivated to learn. And again, like that, 73% of those that respond to CQ, they say that, yes, they feel motivated to learn. So that was kind of, I think for me, the most thing that I saw was the enthusiasm about these assignments, about these projects in the course. And okay, I am a data-driven person, so I want to see what we have done with the grades, right? So this is for the project final grade, so the one that will be after revisions, and this is the grade that they have given themselves. So the black points are between 5 points of what they gave themselves, and some students, they gave a range. So they tell me, oh, I think I reserved between 85 and 90%. So for this graph, I just took the middle for what we gave them. And there was a student that was really strict grading themselves. So they had a rubric and they were deducting points of everything. And we said, like, I don't reserve a 70, I can reserve a 90. So we pumped that back a lot. So this was an outlier. And then we did have some students that gave 100 or 100 days a week. That, most of that was when they, in the justification, they were saying, oh, I spent a lot of time doing this. Well, that was not the point, right? Or I put a lot of effort. So those that they really give me a good justification about the grades, then I went and changed a lot of those grades. But 61% were within 5 points of the self-grade, which is, I think, means that they really were we were kind of in agreement about the grades.
Okay, so for our last part, we wanted to give some suggestions for anyone who might be envisioning trying to do something like this. So providing a rubric is a suggestion. So in my case, I actually did not have a very defined rubric that I gave them in terms of, okay, you're going to grade yourself on these criteria, but I didn't sort of break it down in as much detail as I might have in a different situation. Mostly because I really didn't know what to expect and I didn't know where they were going to take these projects. So I felt like I'm not really sure I can put a lot of detail in a rubric at this point. So I sort of said, okay, let's see what happens. I did find grades on average were higher in this delivery of the course than in former years. Now it's a little bit, I had to make a few adjustments. Interestingly, most of the adjustments I made were bumping up grades, who again, students were being a bit harsh on their self-evaluation, in my opinion. On whole, the class average ended up being about 5 to 8% higher than it would have been previously. But I didn't feel bad about that because I felt they were so engaged and I think they really did learn and they deserve to have a higher grade. So I think this kind of format really made them deserve a higher grade. But I think that a well-designed rubric would lead to more probably even grades with previous years and a more comprehensive self-assessment. So maybe having them think a bit more about things they wouldn't have thought of. So for the next.
For the assignment, I didn't give them any rubric. And I noticed that then the criteria that they used to self-evaluate, it was very diverse, right? Like some use the criteria of how much time I invest on this, or how much effort. Another were kind of focusing on the results that they got. So for the project, I gave them a rubric, and it was a challenging rubric to design because it has to be generic, like, right? It has to be very generic and thinking about what the objectives of learning should be. But I gave them a rubric. And I think that increased self-grading consistency, like the kind of focus on what they should think when they were self-grading. And also, I think they gave a guide of what we should be learning from this project. So for the next time that I teach this course, I will give it rubric from the beginning. And for, I think it's important to clarify expectations to the students. So in my case, I really emphasize that we need to justify their self-grading in terms of explaining why they are giving that self-grading to themselves. So I did put a lot of emphasis in tell me why you are deserving this grade.
Yeah, and for me as well, I felt like really key to this working out well was setting up the expectations from the very beginning. So that meeting that I mentioned previously where I gave them the index cards, I told them this was really about them learning. They need to take ownership and they need to trust that I am believing that they're there because they want to learn and they have to trust me in this process, that I'm not going to kind of trick them into something and they're going to, in the end, not have focused on the right things, said, okay, self-evaluation was basically something they had not had experience with before. So they were a little bit nervous about this. But it did, after a couple of days, I felt like they got the hang of it. They understood what the purpose was, and they really started to focus on their own interest and motivation more. So I think the outcome was more meaningful learning. Another suggestion is providing ideas. So in the for the self-directed learning, I had two sort of components. First, the orientation exercise. So the point of this was just like, okay, let's get to know the environment where we're going to be spending the next 2 weeks. So I wanted them to kind of have a little blurb that they could share with the class about the geological setting or the social setting or anything else. So we kind of all worked together to generate ideas at the beginning. So that kind of helped them get the thought process going. Okay, what kind of ideas, where are we going? What does this look like? And then for the main project, I did have that sort of prepackaged microcosm project that I mentioned previously. I had included that because I'd done it in previous years. I thought, well, maybe someone really doesn't have an idea and will want to take that, but I expected most people would just go their own way. But in the end, 9 of the 11 students were not really sure what they wanted to do as a project, so they all went with the microcosm. So I felt like a lot of sort of reservation there, which was surprising to me. So it was kind of interesting to see what in this group, we had half people saying, yeah, I'd like to have something already sort of assigned to do, and other people, no, I really want to do my own thing. So I think it's maybe important to have some ideas and have some choice, and maybe be prepared for this.
Yeah, in my case for the assignment, I say like, do whatever you want to. And then we have students coming back to me and say like, can you give us some ideas? So I did give suggestions for assignment 1. But these suggestions came after they had to start the assignment, right? So it was not that it was already there. So I gave them suggestions and very kind of, not very detailed suggestions. I said, oh, you could do this, you could just one ideas. And so at the end of the student choose one of these high-level suggestions. And for the project, I didn't give them any suggestions, so they had to go and come up with their own project. And so it's important to give them feedback, especially when they're submitting the plan. So we look at that, and this is critical to kind of let them know, okay, you are going in the right direction, or no, maybe you need to change gears. And also we gave them feedback on the submission.
Yeah, so feedback is certainly an important component of this. So I did a mixture of written feedback and oral feedback, and I used the TA and graduate students as well to provide some feedback. So just, okay. So I guess quickly what to expect when adopting these strategies. We found that in general it was well received by students. There was different degrees of comfort with giving them choice. Maybe this will lead to higher grades than you've had in the past. You will spend less time grading as an instructor, but providing feedback is where you'll spend more time. And you'll probably be spending less time designing assignments and projects as well. So there's this kind of like balance of how you're going to spend your time that switches. So we do the last.
So this is kind of for the last kind of quick question. So will you consider adopting self-grading and self-directed learning in your courses? And we are almost running out of time. We please. Oh, you cannot. Oh. Oh no, yeah, it's working. It's maybe not for me. And kind of to start the discussion, that was our last slide. So kind of what would be your number one concern if you decide to adopt these strategies? Or actually ask some questions for us. So that's the end of the presentation. And you are welcome to say it verbally or Multimedia. And if you are like most of my students, they will go to Multimedia. Theoretical basis. In the presentation, there are some sources that we have referenced. So there is a lot of kind of already articles in education conference about self-grading and self-directed learning. So there are some frameworks for adopting them.
Yeah.
And there is also some studies showing that the students feel more motivated, they feel more engaged with the material, and so on.
Does it work for larger class sizes?
I don't know.
We haven't tried it yet.
We haven't tried it yet, so it was 31 students, the size of my class. For a really large class, I think it will be probably in teams to work, because otherwise the instructor will spend a lot of time reviewing all the ideas, providing feedback. So maybe giving them as.
Did you find that in the cases where students had graded themselves pretty high, you ended up with uncomfortable conversations with those students? Did you have to meet with them to say, in fact, this was too high, you didn't get 100%, you only, or do you just change it and that's that?
No, so we provided, at least in my case, we provided feedback, and the students have that feedback. I have only one student that came back to me to disclose why was that the case. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, it was one, I felt it was maybe a little bit higher than I would have given the student, but I let them. I didn't actually change. I only changed upwards. I didn't change downwards. Yeah. Yes.
Great presentation, and it's really fascinating to see how you both took it and applied it to different subjects. You mentioned about you had given them the freedom to decide on their topic, but 9 out of 11 went with the topic you gave them. So how much of that do you think is just because this was so new to them? Like if they had done it in a previous course already,
Right.
A lot of it is that trust, right? Well, what if, and lack of confidence, what if I pick the wrong topic?
Exactly.
The wrong project, and how do you think you could help them with that?
Yeah, I think it was probably a lot to ask in this kind of very short setting, which was kind of the reason why I thought, well, I'll have something prepackaged. But I agree. I think if they become more exposed to this mode of working and learning, and they get used to it, they'll probably become more comfortable. I mean, you had grad students, and you could see even with the grad student population, they're not all choosing to do their own project. I didn't mention this. I also did some self-directed learning as part of a course I taught with 40 students this winter, upper level undergraduate. And there I had 10 out of 40 who chose their own route for a project. So I think it's a matter of getting them used to the idea, and just, again, that concept of trust is big. Yeah, it's huge.
Sorry for the interrupt.
No, that's good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next we have Dr. Jeanette Byrne and Emily Coombs, I think, is going to.
Lily's doing the work.
Emily's doing all the work, so welcome, Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Coombs, and I just completed my undergrad in kinesiology. I've been doing my honors research under the supervision of Dr. Jeanette Byrne. So over the last few months, I've been looking at student learning experiences and preferences within the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation. So why did I choose this topic? For one, learning is a very large part of the university experience, I'm sure, as you all know. But as a student myself, I know how important it is. And I'm just going to quickly touch on my experience. So over the past 4 years here, coming into my first year, I didn't know what learning was. I would reread, I would memorize, and I would write it word for word on my exam and not remember anything else. Now looking at my 4th year that I just finished, I now appreciate learning, understanding, comprehending, being able to apply your knowledge. I've also had the opportunity to interact with other students and peers, and I hear their learning experiences and what they struggle with. So based on my experience and my interactions, this is what motivated me to do research towards improving the learning experience for students in the HKR faculty. So I've done lots of reading, lots of research that's been done prior, and it's so clear that there is things that work, that is effective, and then there's also methods of teaching and assessment that are not effective. But there's very or much less research that goes into the classroom and asks the students, how are students feeling? What do students prefer, and what has their experiences been like in learning in university? So as I was reading all this research that's already been done, there's so many different factors that can impact the quality of the student learning. So I'm going to highlight 4. So assessment methods, how students are assessed in class and how they prefer to be assessed, impact their learning. Teaching methods, so how educators teach in class and then how students prefer to be taught, impact learning. Students' feelings and emotions, so how they feel during their university experience, also impacts learning. And lastly, study strategies. So the approach that students take to studying also affects the learning that they have. So after reading lots of research, I've come to 3 research questions. The first one, how do students in the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation prefer to be taught? What assessment methods do students prefer the most? And how do students feel during their learning experience? So I created a survey, and it was 6 sections. The first section included demographics, just to get an idea of the age, gender, what program they're in, what year they're in. Then the second section asked a couple questions. How do students prefer to be assessed in class? The third section, how do students prefer to be assessed in class? And I also asked how much stress do students associate with each assessment method? The fourth section included approaches and study skills inventory for students. So this is a survey that categorizes student learning into surface, strategic, or deep learning. But for this presentation, I will not be covering this data. And then the fifth section asked a question, how often in the span of a week do students feel each emotion or feeling? And then I ended with an open-ended question, just to get an idea of more insight or more experiences that students wanted to share. And it wasn't a prompted question, it just asked, what else do you want to share about your learning experience? So there's descriptive and thematic analysis. So there's summary of demographics. We use the mean, mode, standard deviation. And the thematic analysis was used to identify the themes that was drawn from the open-ended question. So based on this, what did we find? 115 students completed the survey, completed all parts of the survey. 53 were in kinesiology, 26 were in co-op, 21 in physical education, and 15 recreation students. 51 were in 4th year, 41 were in 3rd, 15 were in 2nd year, and 8 were in 1st year. So looking at the student feelings, we asked, in the span of 1 week, how often do they feel these emotions? As you can see, this is the list of the emotions and feelings that we looked at, and it was based on a 5-point scale. So 1 being they never feel this emotion, and 5 being they always feel this emotion. So this is the mean based on all students that answered. And you can see the top one here, students almost always feel tired in school. Then the next one is stressed, and then anxious, and then the 4th one is happy. So the top 3 are negative feelings that students experience the most in school. And then teaching methods. So I asked, how much do you prefer each teaching method based on a scale of 1 to 5? So the dark blue on this side, this is not preferred, or in brackets we had, I hate it, so which is a straight. And then on the other side in the pink, this is I love it, or most preferred. And the x-axis shows the amount of students that responded. So for this specific question, about 121 responded. So I'll highlight the top 3. These are the top 3 that students preferred the least. So as you can see, the dark blue along with the light green, this shows students do not prefer this method, and over half of the students actually reported that they don't prefer it. The flipped classroom, if we look at the dark blue, this shows that they hate it, and then the green also shows that they still don't prefer it. And then case studies, about half also do not prefer case studies as well. Now looking on the other end at what students do prefer, the most preferred is activities and games. So we can see between the pink and this blue here shows I love it or most preferred. So over half of the students do prefer activities and games. Very few students don't prefer it. And then lab work and hands-on, we can see, again, over half the students do prefer this hands-on work. And then traditional lecture-based teacher-led learning, over half of the students also prefer this type of learning. And looking at preferred assessment methods, we asked the same question: how much do you prefer these assessment methods, based on the 5-point scale, this being not preferred or I hate it, the pink being I love it or most preferred. And then for this question, there was about 115 students who answered this question. Here is the list of assessment methods, and I'll highlight the top 4 first. So these are the ones that students did not prefer the most. So the top one being oral individual presentations. Over half the students said that they hate it, and very few students said that they preferred it. And in oral group presentations, they still did not prefer this method, but it's a little bit better than individual. Written closed book tests, a little less than half the students said that they don't prefer it, but you can see there's a large amount of students that just tolerate it. And then the group projects, you can see roughly about half of the students also do not prefer doing group projects. And looking on the other end, the method of assessment that students prefer the most is written open book tests. You can see the vast majority of the students do prefer this method. And then multiple choice tests and individual projects, roughly about the same amount of students prefer this one. And then specification-based grading, about half the students also preferred this method. So as I said, I also asked how much stress do they associate with each method of assessment. And it turns out that the students that reported that they do not prefer or they hate the 2 presentations, they were associated with the highest amounts of stress. So going into the themes, I just want to highlight that personally, and I hope you do too, I think that themes are the most important and powerful part of this research, because this is not my words, this is not from other researchers, this is straight from the students and how they feel. So this open-ended question, it was not prompted, and it was not required, so they took the time to write in this open-ended question, so which means they think that this is important. So 49 students responded to this open-ended question. 20 of these talked about authentic learning. So students value the authentic learning experience, and in this case, this means understanding. They're comprehending what they're learning, and they're able to apply their knowledge rather than memorization. So 4th-year HKR students said more emphasis on learning than achieving a mark. The stress associated with achieving a mark reinforces short-term memorization over understanding and retention. More collaborative and discussion-related approaches would help contribute to comprehension and retention. Then the next theme looks at Brightspace or online platforms, which can be a great tool to use, but students find it very challenging when professors don't use Brightspace well. So 4th-year student said, one aspect that I feel hinders my ability to learn efficiently is the inconsistencies in how Brightspace is used. Although I understand that it is my responsibility to be organized, it should also be the responsibility of the professors to ensure that Brightspace is used to its full potential. The next theme, students want educators to remember that they have lives outside of the course that you are teaching them. Another 4th-year said, recognizing that students have lives outside of school, such as jobs, family, mental health stuff, can really help. A bit of flexibility and understanding can go a long way in helping students succeed without burning out. The next thing looks at group projects. So I want to highlight that group projects can be a great thing because it gives opportunity for collaboration and you can learn from other people. But students reported that group projects where the workload is not evenly distributed can lead to increased stress and decreased learning. A 3rd-year HKR students said group projects where the prof assigns the group are often unfair and leave some people with more work than others. Next is at how the educators are teaching. So students think that they need more than just read the slide lectures. They want to use activities and hands-on learning, which helps with learning and focus. And it also helps with the practical application side of learning. A 1st-year HKR student said keeping us engaged in lecture is needed. I often find myself getting distracted by other things to do on my computer rather than engaging in lecture. Then the last thing looks at expectations, so what is expected of the students. They want the educators to make course expectations and expectations for evaluations clear So a fourth year HKR student said clear expectations about what is expected of us to know on exams, and in brackets, it's not a big guessing game. So I'll give an example. If an educator is giving a closed book exam and they say, here's 5 chapters of the textbook, know those 5 chapters, that's a lot of material with no guidance or expectations. So if an educator could say, this exam is based on these 5 chapters, but here are the main concepts that maybe you should focus on or apply your knowledge to, would give better expectations for the students. And then these themes lead into my discussion of the student voices. So as I said, the question is unprompted. They think it's important to take time to respond to this. This is coming straight from the students, their experiences, and what they have to say. So after I presented this research a few weeks ago, I had quite a few students come up to me and say, this research, this is us, we are the students, and it matters. I also had people come up to me and say, you used my quote from the open-ended question. And they said, I finally felt like I had a voice and like what I say about my learning experience matters. So should educators just be doing what students prefer? So I said students really don't like presentations. So am I saying maybe we should stop presentations? That's not what I'm saying, but there's a reason why they don't prefer it. So if educators can show the rationale or the value as to why they are choosing a specific method for teaching or assessment, then maybe they can help guide the students from, oh, I really don't like this, to maybe, oh, I don't like this, but now I can see why this is going to benefit me and my learning in the long run. So just give that extra hand in their learning. And then enjoyment should be a part of the university experience too. So research does say negative feelings have a negative impact on the quality of student learning. So to see that the top 3 feelings are negative, students can't learn when they're constantly stressed, constantly tired and anxious. So to see that the top 3 are negative, how much of an impact does that have on their learning? So maybe instead of an educator thinking, what should we do in class today? What teaching, what assessment method? Maybe they could think, how can we make the class maybe a little more enjoyable or a little more fun, just to decrease those negative feelings for today and give the students a better learning experience. So where do we go from here? This research is just beginning. So we're doing more data collection within the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation, but also expanding to other departments at Memorial. And just to expand the pool of research and the data collection that we have to get more insight to other students' experiences. And then types of stress. So there's good stress and there's bad stress, but the research that I just took all the stress as negative, which may not be the case. So in future research, if we could have some type of question or some factor that could distinguish between what they're reporting as good and what they're reporting as bad stress, this would just give more insight into how that is affecting their learning experience. And then educators. Educators are obviously a very big part of the student learning experience. So how can we incorporate them into this research? So if we could go to educators and ask, how are you feeling while you're teaching? What are your experiences like with the students? Then we can take what the educators say, what we know from research, and what we now know from students, and try and come together to align more closely to strategies that can lead to deep, effective learning experience for students in university. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
When you had when you listed the evaluation methods and stuff, did you explain some of them to the students, like what you meant by it? Because some of them may not have experienced it, therefore, may have changed their.
We did have short explanations for the ones that aren't that common, but also I had another question when I presented the past research. And some of these, students, especially first or second year, they may have never experienced these before.
Yeah.
So that could also be another factor as to the way they question. Yeah.
This is less a question than a shocked comment, but I don't know, it was not this one, but the other one. I think that lecture-based is at the top 3. Like intuitively, you expect lecture-based to be very low, based on what we're told about attention span and that sort of just.
That was also not expected, but based on what I've read before in other research, it is the most common way to teach. So if this is all students know from kindergarten all throughout school, maybe that's what they're comfortable with.
I'm just going to add to that from some of my own work with students. Some of the reasons they've given me why they like lectures is because they can come to class, sit there. They don't have to pay attention. It's their choice. They're given the lecture notes, no work, no responsibility on their part. So students will have different kinds of reasons, but that's one of the reasons that makes it quite popular coming from students themselves. Kind of why they like the multiple choice exams, because they can memorize it. So it keeps on going out. They don't remember, but it's a done deal. But so students will have different kinds of reasons
Yes, yeah.
for why they have preferences.
I'm sorry.
But the other slide we had, I don't know what specifications think that one was. What is that?
Specification based? That's when there's a rubric. So the educator will give the rubric, the student completes the project or the assignment, and you get a grade. But if that grade is not what you were expecting, or you want to discuss the grade, you can go back to your educator and you can discuss what you learned from the experience. And sometimes your grade can change. Yes, yes.
Just, I mean, specifications is more, it's project-based, like Emily has said, and there are specific expectations, so you must do X, Y, and Z, and if you do X, Y, and Z, then you get full marks, whatever that mark is. Usually the mark is just completed, you've been successful, and if you haven't been successful, if you haven't met one of the requirements, then your mark is unsuccessful. Here's a whole lot of feedback. You can take that feedback and change your assignment, and potentially then it becomes successful. There are times where the student just doesn't want to do the work to make it successful, and then you have a discussion with them to say, okay, what does your grade look like? So, yeah, awesome.
From my perspective, you were talking about lecture-based. I'm an older student. I believed that I wasn't learning if I wasn't being lectured to and I didn't memorize. I guess that's how I grew up. And it wasn't until I started university many years ago that one of my instructors said, just read it, you got to stop trying to memorize everything. And that was my first sort of light bulb of, I don't need to be taught that, it's a talk and talk. So I think that some schools that students are coming from are still doing the talk and talk, so they're not used to anything other. So they don't need to learn unless that's.
Yeah, and sometimes that's just what they're most comfortable with. That's why they report it. Yes.
So I can talk as a learner, why I may prefer lecture-based. I would say it's easy. You just sit and debates are, on the other hand, it might be a bit more difficult. That's first thing. But the next thing is that people adapt to changes very hard. And I've always been taught in a lecture-based, and my perception of that I'm learning something, it doesn't mean that I'm learning something, but my perception of learning might be better than that. I may actually learn better in debate. However, my perception of learning might be better in lecture-based because I feel like that's comfortable, that that's how the way that I learn. And that's why it might be like, my feeling might be towards that. And however, I believe that in debates, I learn better, but on lectures, it's easier. And somehow psychologically, I believe that I'm learning. In debates, I feel like I'm just losing my time. I'm just blabbing and not learning something. That's as a learner, as a student, my perspective on it.
Oftentimes students who think that way think the instructor is right. I think the instructor has the knowledge, so I'm going to sit there and listen to the expert.
Yes. I had a lot of students comment the same thing that you did. So it must be common for students just be comfortable in that.
That's perhaps a broadening question. I'm wondering, in particular looking at this slide, if there might be some like selection bias in the sense that you're dealing with HKR students. And maybe it's showing my own bias, but I might think that HKR students are going to be students who particularly like activities and games. We're us engineers stuff. Right? So it might be a difference.
For sure, yeah.
In fact, I think that transport might move well up and down, or for that matter, debates might move well up and down, depending on where you are on campus.
And that would be interesting to see for the future direction.
If you want
Based
to
on the
get a
research.
PhD, maybe.
Based on the research that's already been done, there's no trend. Like some faculties or disciplines would rather the traditional lecture base, while others do prefer the more active or hands-on. But there's no trend. There's no trend that I see yet.
Yes. So I'll just make one comment. I think that's a really great, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why we want to sort of expand it out and say, well, what does the rest of Memorial do? The other thing with this data as well is that we've got predominantly senior students. So and that was just a question of it's an honors and we only have 3 months and we just couldn't get to the first year. So I think it would be really interesting to look at those first and second year students as well. Because I think there might be some differences there too. And then the other thing I was going to just comment on when we were having the discussion about lecture-based versus not, I think something that's probably coming into this preference for teaching method is tied also to assessment methods. So I think if the way you're going to be assessed is closed book, multiple choice questions, then lecture-based is probably the easiest way to learn. But if your assessment is a bit broader and is testing more of that authentic learning, right, that the students say they wanted, then potentially that makes students a bit more comfortable with some of the others. But we haven't had a chance to do any of that type of analysis yet.
And just a quick comment on another view that I have is students, when they exit the system, sometimes have a different view about how the experience they had. So it's another area you could look at. At the exit, you realize that students sometimes who felt it was difficult going through the program have a very different view. They appreciate how they were taught and all that. So it could be part of future study.
I just wanted to go back to Dr. Peters' comment. I have found myself teaching in 2 very different disciplines, say pharmacy and education, and it's like teaching in 2 galaxies in terms of students. If anything honed into me the importance of social cultural learning, it's teaching in 2 disciplines that are so diverse. Their preferences for teaching methods, their preferences for assessment. It's unbelievable the knowledge that they bring. So yes, the student disciplines and preferences, their worldviews, they're certainly diverse.
Yes, which would be interesting to see in research if we do that. Yeah.
You had an experience this semester though with a different discipline. Learning with a different discipline.
Oh, with engineers.
Yeah.
They, from what I have talked to them about, they do prefer the traditional lecture-based learning. We had small groups in our class, and I didn't have an engineer student in my small group, but I spoke with others. And most of the people I talked to in HCare, they enjoy this small group because you can discuss, you can collaborate. While I heard other things from engineers, I think it was just what they weren't used to, but they said they just prefer the traditional lecture-based learning. But I didn't have to go into that.
I think we turned them by the end of the they were learning lots and having fun.
Yes, it's just not what they were used to. Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation and it's really enlightening. Because I've been teaching medical students and also postgraduate students. And I think when you understand all the methods, it's very difficult to just use one type of methods. So it's kind of, when I teach, normally I actually integrate various methods. Like I have technology, I have games. I start with the games first, then technology. We have small group work and discussion in the middle. So many different things because it's 3 hours, you cannot just stand there and teach for 3 hours. It's really like tiring and
they will fall asleep and maybe I will fall asleep. So, I try to make it more interesting. I interact with them and make them talk. And also we have peer evaluation, they evaluate each other as well. So I think maybe you put like, I don't know, mixture methods or ask that what kind of mixture they prefer. Maybe that's one of the questions maybe you can ask, or to develop more comprehensive course. It can be like something that you can ask like in the future, to expand the choices that you have. So maybe having some probing questions, maybe, I don't know. Just because it's even for the evaluation assessment method also, it's not like we are using only one method. We are actually including lots of different kind of methods, integrating them. So I think just asking one of them is like kind of, maybe students not really, how to say, when they say yes to that one, actually it's not really only that, that they have. So I have experienced that my students like case studies because we have case and case-based, problem-based learning. So I think they would have, lots of them will prefer that as a method of learning. So we don't have lab work. So that's like impossible. They will say no to that because they never experienced that. So I think based on the faculties and the subjects, maybe you can actually modify your questions so you will have more accurate answers. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of another question you could ask that may add to perspective. So what kind of assessment do they enjoy or not enjoy? But you could also ask what kind of assessment they tend to do better in. Because just because they don't like the oral presentation, they may actually perform better, attain higher marks. So I wonder if that would add to the overall perspective to question, how they perform, not just how they feel about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to talk. I just wanted to remind everyone that the sessions are recorded and are going to be on our YouTube channel. And I wanted to thank all of our presenters today, and if you could join me thanking them. Thanks. If you're here tomorrow, enjoy the rest of the conference.